It's good to see everyone here this morning. If you have your Bibles handy, and I hope you do in your outlines, we're in the Song of Solomon. We're in chapter 6. Appreciate so very much Nathan teaching the class. That's not an easy class to teach anyway, but he stepped in and did a very fine job. I listened to his presentation, and I think he explains things very well for us. And these first two questions, especially the being terrible as an army with banners, the idea of captivating his heart as an army would, and with the banners, we'll see it repeated in our lesson this morning as we continue in this sixth chapter. So he brings it up again, and we'll talk more about it then. But we got down to the question number 3: how does the Shulamite woman compare to Solomon's 60 queens and 80 concubines and innumerable? So you got a 60 and 80, and then you got a bigger number. Start with the there, and we got queens and concubines and maidens who are kind of maidens in waiting to get to right age, ready to be brought into Solomon's connection of the women that would be a queen or be a concubine. And we think about concubines as kind of a lady on the side, but you read Judges, the 19th chapter, a man had a concubine, and she acted like a harlot. What did she do? She went to her daddy. She went to her father's house. Concubines were a part of his wives. The idea of a sexual relationship is there, bringing forth children is there, and a concubine. And there was a distinction between those queens or wives and those that they had that they maybe desired, but they were still his. They were still his, as well as the maidens in wait. So he has that comparison. One thing that we observed before Solomon's reign, he had 700 queens. We saw that in our earlier in chapter 11 and verse 3, and 300 concubines. Did that number increase? Yes, and that was one of the downfalls of him having these foreign women as wives, that they would lead him into the captivity of their foreign land. And that was a problem. That was a situation that took him away, drew his mind away from God. We're also living in the times of polygamy, and we see there is there's a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. And a lot of times brothers were not of the same mother, and there was conflict between them. There wasn't just one man and one woman for life, as God has brought in from the very beginning, and now he enforces that in Jesus Christ to bring forth that complete harmonious relationship. That's kind of the overriding point, I think, about the Song of Solomon, that the problems that not only of leading away into idolatry, which we don't see in Song of Solomon, but it's the idea of here is love for one, and special one, that's going to be my wife, not one of 700. Or a concubine to bring forth children when others cannot produce, maybe, and I have that they belong to me. That's my concubine. We had 300 of them. And so there was a time God allowed that. Here is a king. He allowed that to take place. But so she stands out here, doesn't she? And we just ask a question, how does she compare? What does he say? Okay, that's unique, isn't it? That's pretty unique. Both of them are right. And so there's my love as Tirzah, comely as Jerusalem. We talked about that as being Jerusalem high, elevated. There's a beauty about that. Tirzah was a capital city of the northern kingdom. It's kind of in the north central part of Israel, and it had its history, and there were women named that, and there was the idea of beauty is connected with that. Thou art fair, a word that he'll use also in our study today. But there's a sense of captivating his attention, and as an army would. And so he says, turn away from me, and he speaks about that. He says, and he expresses how we've seen this before, and I think was brought out in the lesson last week, that a repeating of how captivating her love. He doesn't go into detail like were the lips. You talked about that earlier. Well, he doesn't, but he speaks about the fact of her beauty is still captivating to him. And so we see the leading up, how she, of all of the comparisons that could be made, thou art number one, and unique would be there, but there's a sense that you're number one. But you're number one to whom? And there's the uniqueness, I think, translation that brings that out. She is the only one of what? I got to think like the Bible wants me to think. Well, she stands out, no comparison, but she is the only one of her mother. She's the choice one of her that bear her. Now, that doesn't mean she doesn't have siblings, but she was indeed honored among the very one who bore her. We got to think like that. And we may realize, well, she is saying how unique she is, but in order to establish that, we got to go through the gate that he wants us to go through, and at least acknowledge the uniqueness. It's not about, oh, you just stand out for me. You're special to your mother and the one who bore you. And while there may be virgins without number, it says, my dove, which is expressing how you looked about the eyes we saw earlier, eyes of a dove. My undefiled, she's pure. She is the only one of her mother. She's the choice one of her that bare her. The daughters saw her and called her blessed. So we may see, was it her daughters? Well, maybe she's the only daughter. But do we have the daughters of Jerusalem in this story already? We do. And they're going to stand out in this section of our lesson 5. And so here is that special to her mother, special to the daughters of Jerusalem. And we already know how special she is to Solomon. So when we just think, well, you just stand out and let's move on, take the time to grasp why that was a special thing for her mother. She was special to her, the one who bore her. So she's special from the very beginning. She is special unto the ladies that look at her even before maybe the king was with her. And they call her blessed, and she's surely blessed amongst all. And there takes you through, I'm with the thinking of God. And you don't pick and choose what your narrative is. You don't pick and choose, well, I like that out of the narrative. She just stands out, she's unique. And especially in the context, it's Solomon. What did the text tell you to go see? How special she is to her mother. Think about that. Try to explain that. Try to take us there. Because that's the depth of this, and I think it's just showing a comparisons. As you see the numbers increase, as how he puts these together to say, 80 concubines, 60 queens. And then innumerable, it goes 60, 80, innumerable, it goes mother, blessed of the daughters. And we have now coming to Solomon. There's harmony, there's progression. And we need to grasp that. That's the nature of the poetry that we are observing. And so I gather that. And you know what? You can't contradict me on that, because I took you, or when we read that, when you grasp that, how deeper do you need to go into the narrative? Well, that's where he took me. I'm thinking with God. And we'll take from that and we'll go here and go there. Well, you can't get any more than unique and one, and she's the special one of her mother. And that's the depth. And so there's no mystery. I wonder why we can't understand this alike. Don't be scared of the narrative, but honor it. And if it's in the poetic language, it's very hard. You have a challenge, and Nathan to stand up and teach as he did. He had to dig, and it showed that you do that. This is not an easy thing to interpret, especially this lesson. We got to be flexible to say, well, which way are we going to go here? How are we going to turn? Well, turn or a direction. We can discuss it. Which way did you go? It's the way I went. Got a contradiction? Or maybe it's just emphasizing something that's there and I haven't seen. That's the beauty of the class that we're having. You can add to that. Anything you want to add to that in that particular question that we have? Okay, question number 4. So verse 9, I don't want to leave that too quick. My dove undefiled, only one of her mother, says the queens and the concubines, they praise her. It says, who is she that looketh forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, terrible as the army with banners? Let's don't pass that up. There's the terrible as the army with banners. So there, that word is terrible. It's awesome. And what makes it awesome? You look at the banners that may be just the flags and all the things that go with an army. And there's the pomp and circumstance. They're flaunting. And a lot of times an army will flaunt those flags, a men of war, and that grabs your attention. And so that she stands out as awesome, terrible as an army with banners that would just frighten you with all of the pomp and circumstances that they have and just capture your attention. And a lot of times armies would shout when they run. And they had their flags when they go. That's a terrible thing. It's something that's going to captivate me. So you get the picture of an army that's terrible. And he said, don't forget the banners that go along with that. It just brings that awesome moment of being captivated by her. And we continue that in this passage. Terrible as an army with banners. So what's the flaunting? What's the thing that goes along with how awesome that one is? And our Bible calls it terrible. She looketh forth as the morning. And he says, fair as, there's our word fair again. And clear as the sun. Distinguish that from me. We got to put it in the context morning. There's some mornings, go walking, the moon's still up. And then the sun is going to take over. We know how that works. But why use the word clear? Your translation may read differently, but we're going to harmonize what's taking place. Fair as the moon, clear as the sun. Well, isn't the sun fair? If you can't see it, it's a fair day. You know, we can talk about that. But it says clear as the sun, fair as the moon. And that is describing, I think, her beauty, her magnificence, and why she's captivating to him. So let's try to read his mind. Let's try to read the Scripture's mind. Can you look at the sun? Might go blind. Clear, bright. It's purity. It's a point that says, here is, in fact, the word means empty. Empty? Yeah. It is so clear and bright. It's empty. It's full of its glory. And indeed, it is clear. We would say that when the people gave liberally, that word means sincere. And that doesn't mean I'm just sincere. That means that you're not divided. It is wholly concentrated upon giving in order to help my brethren. Liberality. They say, I'll put that in, but give me some change. It wasn't that. It's just voted. I'll give out of my poverty. I don't have anything, but I'll give. I'm giving. And that's the word clear as the sun. And whether it speaks about her purity, or it's just a brightness, she's empty of anything that would discredit her as shining so brightly in my life. And we want to see, that may be her purity, but it gets his undivided attention. Clear as the sun, and he says, fair as, I can look at the moon. And I can look, the word is pleasant. It is beautiful. Does looking at the sun in the evening, is that a pleasant moment? Looking at the moon? I'm not going to look at the sun that way. Drove back yesterday, I had to head east. And therefore I'm facing the sun early in the morning. And it was blinding. And even when you had your sunglasses, it's blinding. And I thought about how clear that is, in the sense that it is focused. I can't even look at that, but I can see the intensity of the brightness. And I think about her in the eyes of Solomon. And then it's just pleasant as I look at the reflected light from that sun up on the moon. Pleasant and bright. The intensity of her beauty is something that is pleasant to look upon. And it captivates my heart. Nathan, you had your hand up. You want to add? Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very true. Anybody else want to add to that? She sure captivated, didn't she? We've already seen her beauty talked about. And then, beginning with verse 11, where does the Shulamite woman go to? I went down where? Now, you want to take that out of context and apply it to someone going to a church they don't like? What would they call them? I went down the Garden of the Nuts. My dad lived in a time where that's exactly what a man said in a debate about brethren. I've gone to the Garden of the Nuts.
The following verses spell that.
Huh?
The following verses.
I know that. But who cares when you're in a debate? And then I went to the Garden of the Nuts. The guy in my point, I've just gone to the Garden of the Nuts. Well, he quoted the Bible, didn't he? Yeah, and that's not a flattering thing. I went to the Garden of the Nuts. Well, it is when you look at the context in it. And that's what we've got to do. The verdant green plants, but you might have another word describing green of the valley, to see whether the vine budded and the pomegranate were in flower. And so, is she going back to her homeland in her mind? Is she going there? That's where she's come from. I'm a Rose of Sharon. I've come from that place of the wilderness where in the flowers and nature. And so you go from one thing that she's captivating Solomon's love and attention, and he says, I went down. This is where I'm going. And we see how she describes how that was interrupted. So where does she go, and what happens to her before she's aware of it? And why would I say that? And we'll describe that. Before I was aware, my Bible says, my soul. Let's talk about my desire. My desire set me among the chariots of my princely people. We've already seen the palanquin being set forth to go pick her up and bring her to Solomon, and where he's captivated by her love and all of those things. She's already had that, and there's the chariots of my people that had all the army to protect her at night while they're bringing her. And it seems to me here that somehow before I was aware, so where is she in her thinking? What is she daydreaming about? What is she thinking about? I went to the Garden of the Nuts where things are flowering, fruit is producing. and it was in flower, and that's where her desire is. All of a sudden, she's waking to a reality. What is it? The pomp of Solomon, the great glory of Solomon, and they're my people. The Jews are my people. And I am being brought along with chariots of my princely people, and who's hollering to welcome her in verse 13? Return, return, O Shulamite. Well, that tells me I went down, verse 11, and this is, I was interrupted. Return that we may look upon thee. Yeah, we already know how beautiful she is, and we're going to see that set forth again. So I think her desire, of course, her beloved, I think, is the shepherd boy. She continues to think about him in the context of how Solomon thinks about her. And we saw from the very beginning that she wishes to be kissed by his mouth in the very first chapter. There was an honor to be chosen by Solomon. He's the king. And there was that glory that was connected with position she had. And could you say, as we've studied here, that she didn't stand out among all the other women, especially to Solomon? So there's a sense of her being, that's a compliment. She's getting compliments all the time. But where's her heart? It's in the Garden of the Nuts. It's where the flowers grow. It's where the fruit is produced. That's where I'd like to be. I'm in the chariots of my people. They're my people, and there's the army here. It's protected. It has its own glory, and she's swept away. She has to come, and we'll enter into this next chapter. But here are these daughters of Jerusalem that are crying for her to come, and that they may look upon her. Any comments on where does she go? Garden of the Nuts. That's a beautiful thing to her. And what happens to her? She's set. I'm set. My desire, where it was here, and all of a sudden I'm set here. Not that I desire to be in the chariots of my people. I guess you could look at it that way. But the flow of the song is trying to realize there's drama happening. There's things that are changing. And I think this is a great point of that contrast that's being set. My desire is there, and now I have to channel that desire. And I have to channel to someone else, and I'm being brought now to be looked at. Any comments or questions on that? All right, let's ask. We're interpreting, and your interpretation may be better. It's just as good anyway as mine. So I'm asking you the question here: how does the Shulamite woman respond to the daughters of Jerusalem desire to look upon her? Let's start there. Because return, what does the second half of verse 13 say? Why will you look upon the Shulamite? And my Bible says, as upon the dance of Mahanaim, and they just transliterate the Hebrew word. So they didn't really have a definition to go with that. And so we have to figure out this dance of Mahanaim. Anybody get David?
The New King James puts some that's more comprehensible to us than that obscure word. It's called the dance of the two camps.
And that clears it for you?
Well, that's at least good just because Mahanaim means nothing.
I know, and I agree with you. But now, I've been there. I went to the two camps, and it's going to help you understand it, doesn't it? But two camps doesn't help me at all. The dance of the two camps, okay. What's next? Who? Two companies? Well, there may be two companies ready to come into the valley for battle. We've talked about the terrible, awesome thing of like banners. We haven't We could still stay in that context of how terrible and awesome it is. And here are the dances in the two camps as maybe they're getting ready to go to battle. It's plural. It's sometimes ahead of them is sometimes the angels. It's kind of hard to define it, but what we do in the idea of camps, dancing in the camps, we realize there is the dancing that's taking place in maybe this camp and that camp, but it's things that why will you look upon me as something that stands out like that? Loud dancing in the camps before a battle. Maybe it's just a camp of plurality of people in it, because that's sometimes how the word is used in the Old Testament, of angels and a lot of other things. That's why it's hard to find here. But David, you're right, the idea of two camps, that helps a little bit better than the Hebrew word. And that's exactly what it means. And that's why two, because there could be a plurality. That's how the word is used. But that drives me two camps, two armies, two groups of people. They're all dancing. And that's how she looked upon that. So with that thought in mind, what is the Shulamite doing before the daughters of Jerusalem that causes them to compliment her feet, her thighs, her hands, her head? What is she doing? You think she might be dancing? Well, Vashti didn't do that. Vashti had to dance before men. This context, she's dancing before women and before her husband, if he's present at this very moment. You see that? Well, what's the first thing she's observing? If it's dancing, thy feet in thy sandals, because your toes are real pretty. They're painted real nice today. The work of the hands of a skillful workman. That be involved in dancing? The dance? She's being paraded before the daughters of Jerusalem to admire her beauty. And that's not an unholy thing. Then we're not talking about the dancing with males and the lust. And if anyone is desiring her that way, which Solomon is, she could be brought before him too. It's her husband, under the standard of polygamy. So I don't think any of that thinking contradicts that, and may help us to understand why the dance of Mahadium, how captivating that is. And so she's captivating as she twirls, moves here and moves there. Her feet, her hands are skillful. All of those things are taking place. And so there's the look at the body in motion. And I think that's what we're looking at here in this beginning. How beautiful are thy feet in sandals, O prince's daughter. The rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of thy hands of a skillful workman. Thy body is like a round goblet. What does your Bible say? Does it say something specific about the body?
That's really a portion of the navel.
You got the navel. And literally, it means the umbilical cord. It's twisting. Her navel moves with her hips. There's a sense of dancing that could be there. And so her body's like a round goblet. It's in motion. It said where no mingled wine is wanted. It's the water thing. So wine was always mixed with water, unless you're a barbarian. You didn't drink it full strength. If it became fermented, you cut that wine with water to keep it from having its alcoholic effects upon the mind. But it's purity. There's a sense of it's with water, and it's sloshing around and moving around here and there. Not sloshing, that's not real complimentary. But there's a movement there, and like the mingleness of water, it's not wanting. You can see that as the body twirls around the waist area. And so we have the question, what is her waist like? What's that? A heap of wheat. So we gotta be farmers for a moment, don't we? What is a heap of wheat? What's the heap part? What does that take your mind to?
Bound in the field, in the center, tight, standing in the field.
And a lot of times after they would kind of take the chaff away from the grain, it would stand up in heaps. That's a beautiful sign. Sometimes I say, well, maybe her waist is a little bit bigger. No, the beauty of that is the fact that it's heaped up and it's among the lilies. It's a time of season where the flowers there. And that's a beautiful sign, especially when you don't have an HEB or anything to go to get your bread. Hey, we're gonna do fine. And they saw beauty in that. And so there's the sense of her, it describes that a heap of wheat set about with lilies. It's beautiful. Two breasts are like two fawns. We talked about that. They're twins of a roll. The neck is like the tower of ivory. We talked about holding 1,000 shields and said, well, is that a complimentary thing? Well, what's the neck like now? Is that a beautiful thing? Ivory's white. A lot of times and towers will be slender. And thine eyes as the pools in Heshbon. Heshbon is primarily west, but it's of the Dead Sea. So we're not looking in things of in the Promised Land. We're looking east to the area of Heshbon, northeast of the Dead Sea. And there's where the gates were of Bahurim that are there. But there indeed was the pools, that sparkling green, blue water, the depths of reflection, the eyes of a dove, as well as described before. But now it's inviting when we see that taking place about her eyes, and all of this they're captivated by the eyes, but there's a sense that she may be dancing, moving, that before the daughters, and it just emphasizes just how beautiful she is. And that doesn't mean the dancing was wrong here, but that's why when you say, where does God condemn dancing? Well, we're going to teach our young people it condemns dancing. Well, what kind of dancing you're talking about? And that's what I teach the young people in our studies when we have them in our home. I want them to be grounded and not come around, well, dancing is wrong. Well, and somebody takes their Bible, I'm going here. It didn't say it was wrong here either. And there's a sense, what was that? There was the body, there's a beautiful movement of the body. That's a reality. And that doesn't have to necessarily be wrong before your husband or for the other women there who admire her. But that's when you deal with the dancing with some of the opposite sex, and what is condemned about that is indeed lasciviousness. That's a broad term that has a lot that I'm going to give myself over, my thoughts are not going to be restrained. And that's kind of what the modern dance leads you to. That's what makes it wrong. We got to know what makes it wrong, just not big brush. And then we don't help someone see it. We're not grounded in the Word. And someone who is, we'll talk about, there's a lot of dancing in the New Testament that indeed was Old Testament dealing with God's people. And sometimes it was dancing of joy and victory. Have you seen that happen at football games? You were just dancing up and down. Our little kids dancing. We danced and we played the pipe and danced, and you didn't react the way you should. You're supposed to react to that. Why didn't you dance with the music? So there again is caring about the Word of God to come to grips with just what is he saying in this context. So the neck is a tower of ivory, the eyes, what's the nose like? Did she have a big nose? I don't know, but I tell you, it was well formed on her head. It was narrow, and where is it looking toward? It's the Tower of Lebanon, which looketh toward Damascus. I mean, it headed straight north. It was perfectly fixed on her face, like a tower. And well, she's like her neck, but she looks like olive oil. No, she doesn't. There's the idea that it's perfectly fit, that the head is like Carmel, Mount Carmel. It's just well structured. And the hair of thy head, what color is it? It's purple. And that's the beauty of this, is that her hair is black and is shining and glistening as it moves around, and he's captivated by it. He's going to be caught up in its tresses. And it shines in the glistening light, it looks purple. In a sense of glorious, that which is a color. Mount Carmel had shellfish that looked purple near Mount Carmel. Your head's like that. The hair is glistening and gives off that shining of purple. That's a glorious thing. And the hair is like purple. The king is held captive in the tresses thereof. You see the flowing of the hair, the flowing of the body, the movement of the body, and the whole body is set forth there. And he desires her. How fair and how pleasant art thou, O love, for my delight. Nathan, you had your hand up. I didn't answer you quick enough. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? I think you could reason that there. It became a regal color. We know that, don't we? And but the tresses thereof, it captivated him like he caught up in the tresses. So I see a body in motion. I'll call it dancing. And its purity. She wasn't committing the same thing that Vashti said her modesty would not allow. But her modesty is indeed set forth in this setting, that they're looking upon her, and why are you look upon me? Will you look upon the Shulamite as upon the dance of Mahanaim that would attract all this attention? There's her humility. And yet how are they looking at her now? And it just leads into that point. All right. How does Solomon look upon her beginning in chapter 7 and verse 6? We just mentioned that. So what happens in verse 8 and 9? I think you see the sexual desire satisfied there for Solomon's concern. And thy mouth like the best wine. There's the breast, the mouth, and he takes hold of them and all of those things. I think there's that sexual relationship. It's marital sexual relationship. And she's attracted herself. I mean, she had no maybe choice. It was for the women, and here's Solomon, and that sexual relationship is there. Now, our time is almost up, so let's look at a difficult thing here in verse 9, and to be fair. My Bible, American Standard, it kind of breaks now in a new little paragraph. And thy mouth like the best wine. So he's smelling her breath. The breasts are talked about, and thy mouth like the best wine. Let's say there's no break, and this is Solomon. This is his desire for her, as he's going to fulfill that. And he says, thy mouth like the best wine that goeth down smoothly for my beloved, gliding through the lips of those that are asleep. So that could be Solomon, the whole section there. It's like the best wine. So what does it mean, gliding through the lips of those that are asleep? just glides. Have you ever seen someone asleep and there's the whispering of, comes from the mouth like the best wine, and it's kind of, the lips are moving a little bit, and it's just peaceful sleep. That's how he was captivated by her. And I'm saying that goeth down smoothly for my beloved may be her. Now, this, I would wish this for my shepherd boy lover, because I know I am my beloved's, my desire, and his desire is toward me. Solomon, she's still thinking about Solomon. Remember how she was taken from her desire of the garden of the nuts. So I think in this where it will be breaking as far as your outline is concerned here. So recognize it still could be Solomon, and she could still be thinking about Solomon, verse 10. I think that's where it changes here again in the context to her lover. And we'll have to stop there. So keep those thoughts in mind, and Lord willing, we'll begin with last two questions. Thank you.